we're going to give you 4 minutes. Now, who's got a timer on them? Right. When I say get the timer ready, 4 minutes to give a potted history or an elevator pitch of courage.
Courage. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, lovely to be with everybody, and thank you, Dave, for giving me this opportunity. Now, courage, as you rightly said, began in 1988, 30 years ago, but was preceded by about 6 months in which I went to train with an ex-gay ministry called Love in Action in the United States. And my experience of working through being gay and Christian up until then had been one of finding acceptance within evangelical churches on the basis that I agreed that to be gay is wrong, and that I was a repentant sinner who was welcomed into God's kingdom on the understanding that I completely shunned anything to do with the word gay or homosexual and lived a celibate life. And nobody promised me that that could change, but we all had to work towards change because we all need to be reforming sinners. And my experience in England was somewhat depressing of pastoral ministry, not entirely, but I won't go into the detail. In America, where I went to do this training with the Love in Action ministry, the Americans were very much more upbeat and adventurous, and they had a very kind of upbeat setting. Love in Action was a great place to be. If you failed in some way, they'd say, well, hey, today's another day, try again, kind of thing. And it was a much more positive environment. And it was one where, for the first time in my life, I was meeting lots of other gay people, many of whom had loads of experience of being in the gay lifestyle, as we call it. And we were all working together to encourage one another to live a godly life, which meant being celibate and trying to change. So with this, and also the place I went to had a program which they put people through for a year called Steps Out of Homosexuality, which sounds rather ambitious, but in fact it was really a basic Christian discipleship program which could have been used by YWAM or other groups with only a very little bit of input into what they thought the causes of being gay were about. And I think really I was very taken with a positive environment, so it gave me hope for change. And nobody I met over there had really changed in a very convincing way, but nevertheless we were all on that journey together, and so that was okay. You know, it was okay to fail and have setbacks, but we were moving on. So that created the format for how Courage was started in this country. And in those days, True Freedom Trust was the only other ministry around, and they were very loving and very caring, but committed to celibacy, and they didn't really believe you could change. And I was a young man then who wanted to see change. I didn't want to remain stuck where I was. I didn't want to spend the whole of my life living a celibate life on my own. I wanted to see change, that I might have a fulfilling relationship. So I was all for going for whatever God had for me and for others. And we formed a community in Watford, where I was living at the time, and people came and lived in, and we created a very positive atmosphere. And most of the people who came to us had never met many gay people, or certainly no great gay Christian people before, and they thought, wow, I don't have to be afraid of being myself anymore. It was actually quite a positive environment to be in, and we were all in the same boat. We were all trying to be celibate, so nobody felt on their own with it. It was not a lonely battle they had to carry. They were in a whole community of people that was trying to do the same thing. And so it got off to an extremely positive start. And some of the people I know now who were with us in those days say to me, oh, don't be too negative about it. Those are the days where I started being able to be myself and be open about it and go to church and say, what my situation was. And I'd never experienced that before. So although we were aiming for steps out of homosexuality, actually what it was a kind of step into a more secure place as a gay man or woman. We didn't quite mean it that way, but that's what happened, and it actually turned out to be quite good for many people. However, in those early years, we were all trying to find the way through, and the program we ran lasted 1 year, and people then had to move on.
His arm's gone.
Oh my goodness.
Should we give him 2 more minutes?
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Thank you very much. Amazing how one gets into it. So what I noticed was that because we weren't a place for people to stay for life, we're not like a monastic community where people stay committed for life. We wanted to see them move on and get on with their lives. We were just providing a supportive environment for them. And when they moved away from this supportive community and back to their homes, wherever they come from, they were on their own again, and they would suddenly realise, well, I don't know what all that was about, but I'm still gay, and why have I not changed? Maybe I'm just too far beyond God's reach or God disapproves of me too much, or maybe there isn't a God at all. But anyway, they would end up in deep depression. And I would try and keep in touch with people, and I was really dismayed by this. And then when one year, I think it was about 1997 or 8, one chap made a massive suicide attempt and miraculously was saved from finally taking his own life. I thought, I knew that this was something to do with the conflict he hadn't been able to resolve, and I was really worried. I thought, supposing he's the first of a load of people to do this, we really need to start facing up to the realities here. And anyway, nobody in the Exodus groups, Exodus was a group of ex-gay ministries around the world, nobody would be willing to answer the questions, the difficult questions. And the only people I saw doing well were those who accepted their sexuality, dared to believe God would allow them a relationship of love, and then when they found one, they were the ones experiencing the joy that we should have been experiencing in our Christian community. I thought, we've got something very wrong here. And finally, because I saw so many people doing much better once they accepted they were gay, I thought, this is what God's showing us. We've got to accept it. We've been wrong about this all along. Of course, I didn't know how on earth to kind of bring people along with this view. I tried to talk about close friendships. Remember David and Jonathan, Ruth and Naomi? And I would say, well, why don't we emulate them? And people would just sort of go some distance with me until they realised that I would be okay if people, consummated that relationship in a sexual way. And then, of course, they ditched me completely. And actually, it was Richard Kirker that outed me as a ministry that had gone from ex-gay to gay affirming. And that was it. The game was up. And I got shunned by the whole evangelical community and chucked out. But when I got to that point, I thought, you're wrong. I don't care anymore. I want to be where God's working. And for the next 12 years, we worked as a gay affirming ministry, just letting people be themselves and find out what that meant. We tried always to remain a worshipping community, because I thought there are lots of gay groups you could join which are not Christian. We need to be a worshipping community that still takes our Christian faith seriously, where we still encourage one another in the faith, but as gay men and women, or as trans men and women, trans people. And whatever our situation was, we were going to fully affirm people as they were and allow them to grow as God led them.
Thank you very much. So it was a pastoral heart again, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
That led you back, if you like, to God saying, I accept you as you are.
Exactly.
It's beautiful, isn't it? That God accepts us. But we know that God accepts you, and we know that we accept you as you are. And but many churches and Christians and organisations have made your life very difficult since then. And that's 15 years ago that happened. And because of that decision to be inclusive and having to leave, or not having to leave, being chucked out of the Evangelical Alliance, what effect has that had on you and your wife, and does it still have an effect on you emotionally and physical?
Well, thank you. Thanks, Dave. Well, at the time, there was a very, I won't say who it is, but there was a man in the EA who said to me at the end of our last meeting, before I had to finally say goodbye to them, they'd listened very carefully to the journey, and they knew exactly why we'd moved the way we did, and were actually more sympathetic than I think they'd like people to realise. And one of them said to me as a parting shot, he said, you'll be a lot better outside the EA, because then you'll be able to get on and do what you really think you should do, instead of being held back by what we have to say. And there was great wisdom in that. He could see what was happening. And I met that guy 15 years later, and I said, well, what do you feel about all this now? And he said, well, I haven't really changed my theology, but if I saw a gay couple in my church who were really bearing the fruit of the Spirit, I'd have to accept that that's what God was with them. So, sometimes that quiet acceptance of yourself and willingness to be yourself and not care too much what other people think says an awful lot more to people than you realise at the time. It kind of goes in without them admitting it, and then some years later that you see the fruit of it, because they've had to change their mind, because I didn't fit the stereotype of the kind of gay reactionary protester. I wasn't like outrage or anything like that, and I just didn't fit their stereotypes, so they had to begin to recognise that there was some good fruit coming out of what we did. At first it was a very lonely place to be in, because when I'd been chucked out of Exodus particularly, which I've been very involved with and had some very good friends in, and nobody spoke to me. I was just completely ignored and sidelined and everything. And at first that I didn't mind particularly, but then I was quite lonely. But within 1 year, it was really interesting to me. I think it was in 2000, we hosted an Exodus conference, even though I had myself moved on from their thinking. But we committed to this about 3 or 4 years before. And at this Exodus conference in 2000, which was at Swanwick in Derbyshire, I wasn't allowed to put out any literature, I wasn't allowed to do any workshops, I wasn't even allowed to give notices at the meetings because I was now infected with this wrong thinking. However, they were completely dependent on us and Courage to run the conference for them, because otherwise they'd have bankrupted Exodus because everybody had flown in from all around the world to be at this conference. I thought this was a really interesting experience to be at. 1 year later, Bren and I, my wife, were at a group in America called Evangelicals Concerned, run by Ralph Blair, who had right from the start been gay affirming. He was a psychotherapist and an evangelical Christian, but he'd always believed that if the gospel was true, that in other words, that Christ accomplished all that was needed for us to be reconciled with God through the cross, if this was true, then the ex-gay or the anti-gay message couldn't possibly be true. And he founded Evangelical Concerned at about the time when the ex-gay ministry movement was going in America. So all those years there'd been in parallel the choice between the ex-gay and the gay affirming, both in evangelical circles. And we went to this Evangelical Concern conference and we were treated like celebrities because we were the first ministry that actually said we were wrong and that we were moving into an affirming side. And we were treated wonderfully, and I thought, isn't that good of God? We had all our fellowship removed from us by one group, but we were welcomed in by this other group that had been there all the time. And I had to say to Ralph Blair, who ran this thing, I said, I'm awfully sorry, I must apologise to you, but all the years I've known about you and about your literature, I never read any of it because I knew you were wrong. But of course I changed the paradigm of the way we looked at things, and I suddenly realised that it was right there. Every good article and convincing sermon, everything I needed was right there as a resource. And I just hadn't been willing to read it before because I thought that was deception, and I realised that actually that was the way to the truth. What was your question?
How did it make you? You talked about Exodus, and now of course they've changed their mind now as well, and they've closed in 2014, wasn't it?
13, I think it was, yes.
So they've changed. There's still a groups going, but
yes.
Then you changed your mind, and you've mentioned how you came to that decision, but how did it really affect you as a person? Suddenly, you were wrong.
Yes. Well, I think first of all, there were moments of doubt, of course, as to whether I was just off the wall, or, as many people said to me, "Oh, you've allowed your pastor's heart to sway you away from the plain teaching of scriptures." And so I had to ask myself that question many times. But I began to realise that actually Jesus constantly said, "You will know who is true by the fruit of their lives." And it was the good fruit I could see from the lives of people who were at peace with themselves that convinced me that no, this has to be the right way, even though we might still have to work a little bit at understanding the theology of it. But so I suppose one effect on me was this worry, was I deceiving myself? But I think I got to the point by then of thinking, no, it was the conservatives who actually deceived themselves.
So you've changed your mind. You got married in 1991.
Yes.
Now, and in your autobiography, you mentioned, I'm trying to think what you said now, but you said to prove that I could change.
Yes. Yes, something. I actually, ironically, wasn't trying to prove that I changed because I knew I hadn't. But the way I was thinking about it,
a step of faith. That's
a step of faith. That's it.
Yeah.
It was people would talk, and Andy Comiskey, who started the Living Waters thing. He used to talk about the ex-gay plateau, where you'd moved away from a promiscuous life, which I was never in any way, into a place where you were living in a life obedient to God, and then you kind of plateau there, enjoying the fellowship of all the other ex-gays, and never really moving on. And he saw moving on as being willing to embrace all that God has for you, which is to marry someone of the opposite sex, which he'd done. And he used to tout the fact, well, I've got 4 children now, so I'm obviously straight-ish. But you never met a more camp man. He fitted the gay stereotype so well. But anyway, that's a different story. So I met, well, I'd known this woman, Bren Robson she was, and greatly admired her because she was a pioneer for women in leadership in the days when churches never ordained women. And she was the first woman to lead a church in this country before the Anglican Church began ordaining women, and she got such flack for it. So we had quite a kindred spirit because we both had been in very controversial areas of ministry. And so we had a good friendship going, which had been, I think we'd known each other about 17 years actually. And she'd never married, and I'd never married, and we just thought, well, you know, what's marriage about? It's about companionship. So, you know, we like companionship, even if we didn't know how we were going to work out the sexual bit. Nevertheless, we thought companionship was the deal. That's what God said at the beginning. You know, it's not good for man to be alone. Well, this will end our loneliness. So we took that step of faith. And it was years and years and years before I really understood better why it didn't work. We were good friends, but it was very, very difficult for her as much as for me, but for different reasons. Perhaps I can digress and just go into this a little bit now. Because one thing Christians never talk about, and conservative Christians in particular, is the importance of desire that takes place in a relationship. And it's interesting, one of the most amazing texts in the Old Testament, I think in Genesis, is after the fall, and God talks about, for a man, you know, you'll struggle to till the ground and it'll only grow thorns and thistles for you. And for a woman, you'll suffer great pain in childbirth, but you will still desire your husband. And I think that is a most astounding thing to say when you know what a woman goes through in childbirth, the terrible pain of it. She's going to go back for more, but she does, again and again. And that desire for her husband is something so powerful that even though she knows what it's going to mean, she still goes back to make love to her husband again. Of course, it doesn't even mention the fact that the husband will still desire his wife. I mean, that's taken as read. I mean, men never usually seem to have a problem with that, and they don't suffer at all for it. They just get the fun out of it. But I then realised from this, I thought this business of desire is of key importance to a true marriage, because it is supposed to be the union of two people who desire each other, not just for one another's company, not just the companionship, but desire one another physically. And I thought, I never had that desire for my wife. I talked to her about this, so this is not a secret or anything like that. And she understands that for me it was a struggle to try and go through the motions of being a proper husband. And for her, it was a struggle wondering why on earth it was that she was left feeling like a non-person. That's how she describes it now. And of course, because Christians never talk about these things, we never begin to wrestle with or understand the importance of the truth behind this. Now, as a gay man, I always experienced a desire for that intimacy with a man, not with a woman. And many of you will know and understand that, or for a lesbian woman will know what it's like to desire another woman. And that needs to be listened to and taken notice of, because that is God-given. That's something fundamental to being human, that we experience that desire. And so this is all truth coming out that is actually releasing and sets us free, really, to be truly ourselves and who God wanted us to be. What was your question?
I've forgotten now. But I think you've answered it to an extent anyway. So yeah, we talked about you marrying in 1991.
Yes.
And then you were saying it was a step of faith.
Yes.
And then you said about the desire wasn't there.
Yes.
And
right.
How did that affect both of you in that sense?
Well, I think it made for a very, very uneasy relationship, because we were kind of the best of friends, and it was good. I mean, I've known lots of heterosexual married couples who fall out with each other all the time and just seem to have the most empty of relationships. So we had lots of good things about it, but there was something missing and something not right about it. So we were always on edge. And I suppressed that for me. I suppressed all my desires for a same-sex partnership. And she was just terribly angry and frustrated a lot of the time. And I never could understand what could I do to give her happiness. I now understand I couldn't do what was necessary. And we separated in 2012, around the time when I finally closed Courage, because I knew I needed to kind of retire from it, and from running it anyway, from running a ministry. And although that's been very hard for Bren being on her own again, I've supported her all I can. I think she sees more and more now that we had a friendship, we had a relationship like a brother and sister, but it wasn't like a marriage is supposed to be. And the honesty of that has been very releasing. So,
and that's left. Now you're free
to
be in a relationship.
Yeah. Yes, and I'm lucky. I've got a relationship, got a wonderful partner, a lovely guy who seems to love me very much. You've met him, some of you have met him, and I'm very lucky. And I hope and pray that she's just as fortunate, and that God brings a man into her life who will make her feel as special as she deserves to be made to feel.
When you met Pedro, isn't it?
Paolo, sorry, Italian.
Yeah.
not Spanish or Portuguese.
Sorry, yes. When you met him, did it release you in any way? I don't mean sexual or anything like that, but to be that man that you were supposed to be.
I think so. Now, it's a very unusual start to a gay relationship. I have to say, I've not ever heard anybody have a story quite like this one, but he's 30 years younger than me, and he's absolutely stunning, gorgeous young man, and he's Italian, and he's very much a go-getter. And he just knew from the time he saw me that I was the chap he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. Now, I felt very differently about it, because when I met him, I just thought, well, yes, he's a good-looking, nice chap, but he's 30 years younger. Why would a young man like him want to be with an old codger like me? I've often said this to him. I just could not understand why he'd want to be with me, and so I thought, can't be true. I thought he'd wake up from this dream someday and realise I was old and grey-haired and wouldn't want me anymore. And I think there was a bit of a dread in me, really. So I was kind of protecting myself from that day coming, you see. But he wasn't having any of it. Can I just tell a little story about it?
Yes, of course you can, yeah.
And so I was quite conflicted about this, because I thought, go away. It's not right for you to be with me. Go and find somebody of your own age. Was sort of the feeling I had, as I just didn't want to get into something that was just going to be almost, I thought, an inevitable failure. I have since met loads of people who are in relationships with similar age gaps, and they've lasted wonderfully and they're great, but I didn't know that then. So anyway, I struggled, and I thought, well, it's nice being in his company, and it's amazing that he fancies me. I can't think why, but he's very persistent about this. So one day I took the matter to God in prayer, and I said, Lord, what on earth am I to make about this? Is this just a serious temptation which I should shun? I mean, I don't mind the principle of being in a gay relationship, but this just doesn't seem to be right. Or am I to believe this as a view? What am I to think? So it was one of these wonderful times that God just spoke to me. He just said, well, just put yourself in my position for a moment. For years and years, I've listened to your heart cry of longing to be with a guy. But you're a very conservative English chap. You're very inhibited. You've done marvellously well at not getting very involved in other relationships and so on. And you're very self-disciplined and self-controlled. Now, what am I to do to answer this prayer of yours, this heart's cry of yours? How about I bring a young, ravishing-looking Italian into your life who knows nothing of your conservative English boundaries, and he just barges his way into your life and won't take no for an answer? How would that do for an answer for prayer? I thought, I see what you mean. Oh, all right then. If you really feel that this is okay, I'll run with it. You see, so that's how we started. And I still find, well, not so much now, but a bit of it in a resistance, because it just seems so much of an answer to my prayers that I didn't believe God was that good, It's terrible to admit it, isn't it? As a friend of mine once said years ago, God's turning out to be better than I expected.
I think we could all laugh at that.
Yeah. And but sometimes when we cuddle up in bed at night, and I think to myself, this is what I always wanted, to be able to be free, to be completely myself, and just be in love in a relationship with a guy. It's what I always wanted. It's what I was made for somehow. That's how it feels. And why did I ever listen to all that bullshit about it being sinful and wrong? It was just, sorry about the species, but really, it is all bullshit. You asked earlier on, what did it do for me when I changed and I was rejected by the evangelicals? Of course it did what happens to most people. It made me think, well, if I've been this wrong about the subject of homosexuality, what else have I got wrong? Yeah. And it made me have to question absolutely every area of my faith. And I think most especially, most key to me was the issue of the atonement. Now I think that, of course, it's interesting that Steve Chalk had this same battle a few years ago too, but it was happening to me, but in a slightly different way. And I'd grown up with a sense of dread of this angry God who was going to cast into hellfire forever everybody who was a sinner who didn't, become a bona fide Baptist or Pentecostal, and I just lived in dread of this fearful God. and who demanded that his son was punished in the cruelest imaginable way, somehow to vicariously deal with our sins. And I thought, how am I supposed to believe that a God like this is a God of love? I just can't compute it at all. And I suddenly discovered, after I'd been through this process, that there were theologians around who had a very different view of the atonement. In fact, one chap who came to our meeting said he had, in his theological studies, discovered at least 14 different interpretations of the atonement. Don't ask me what they were. I didn't ask him myself. There's far too many for me to remember. But I came to understand the atonement in a completely opposite way in the end, and this is in very simple terms how I would understand it. I'm not saying it's right, I'm just saying this is how I came to be at peace with the whole issue. And I thought, actually, God isn't an angry God. There may be things that make him angry, like any of us can be angry at injustice and cruelty and so on, rightly so. But the God fundamentally is love. But not a kind of sentimental love. He loves us in a very deep and profound and amazing way, and the whole of creation is produced out of his love, and on the brilliance and the diversity of it all is an expression of his love. But we're the ones that have the problems with the anger and the hatred, because we don't resolve our own innate sinfulness or our own rivalry. And James Allison's very good at talking about this. And because of that, because we don't deal with our own innate sinfulness in a healthy way, what we do is we scapegoat other people. And of course the church uses gay people as a scapegoat for all the things that are wrong in the church. They say, oh, well, of course God can't bless us because we've allowed the gays in, or we've allowed gay marriage, or we can't bless this country, or there's been some earthquake or something because of the gays. Of course that's now wearing a bit thin, so now it's the Muslims that are the handy scapegoats. But what this means is that none of us are really dealing with our own need to forgive others and to be kind and caring and reach out to others as Jesus did to all the outcasts. We only learn to be like Jesus, to reach out to all the outcasts, when we have something of his spirit of love, which means that we pay the price of people's unkindness and hatred and hostility and so on. So what was happening on the cross is not that Jesus was dying for our sins, it's that we crucified Jesus because we would not deal with our own anger and hatred, and we wouldn't resolve these things. And what Jesus did amazingly, he said, you can do your worst to me. You can do the worst you can think of. You can flog me to within an inch of my life. You can bang nails through my hands and feet. You can insult me and mock me. You can do all these things, and I'm still going to forgive you. You cannot stop me loving you. So do your worst. I'm still going to love you. And Jesus had said about God, I and the Father are one. Or when you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And I realized this was the most incredible expression of love. And if anybody has any unforgiveness in their heart towards others, or any unresolved stuff, they've just got to stand and look at the cross and think, wow, that's how God deals with all the wickedness of man. He forgives us. And that he opens his arms just to say, I forgive you, I offer you my forgiveness and my love. We can accept it or reject it. And once I saw God in that light, the whole battle went away. I could understand. I could accept my own sexuality. I could accept other people were different. I could accept people coming from other religions and having different perspectives. I didn't have an axe to grind anymore. I could be myself, and I could allow other people to be themselves, and we could grow together to understand what the kingdom of God is really like. I think that was the greatest revelation, really. It's much more important than getting through on the gay issue.
Yeah. Again, the pastoral side coming out. I want to go back a bit and look at courage, all right? Pray the gay away, kind of thing. Have you had challenging and difficult reactions from LGBT groups, Christian groups, people of faith and non-faith, that regarding your change, that they think, but you preach this all in the past. What about the people, I'm not saying you hurt, but what about the people that have been hurt by that message?
Well, the interesting thing is, I've not had all that many people come back to me who complain about being hurt by us in the past, because I think most of them realise that we were all on a journey together.
I'm not saying you hurt them, no, teaching.
Yes, that's right. But I think nobody would have come to Courage had they not been from an evangelical background that taught them that you couldn't be gay and Christian. And they really came to us because they felt reassured that we held the same view as their churches, so we were sound. as they thought. And that gave them a lot of encouragement and reassurance that we were not like a freaky, out on the rim, the edge group. And so that gave them the safe space to begin to ask the questions. And of course, quite a lot of people left from the early days because they had to move on. But then they came back to us when we became affirming, and they said, "Oh, thank God you're saying this, because this is the journey I've been on over these years, but nobody was saying it. And now I realise that actually God was at work in me, helping me to make this journey. I just needed somebody to affirm it and speak it out." So we really became reconciled with most of the people from our early days. Oddly enough, the people who came in the 1990s, a lot of married people actually who were desperate because their marriages weren't working, they were very angry with me because they said, "Oh, you opted for deception. And I came to you having hope that my marriage would work, and now you're telling me that it was okay to be gay all along." And they were very angry. So it's been some of them have not come back, and a few of them have, but they've also been on their journey. It was the people outside who assumed huge hurt and then came and attacked me particularly because I symbolised the whole ex-gay movement for them. And I remember one guy asking me very aggressively, "So what are you doing about repairing all the hurt and the damage you've done?" So I said, "Well, what would you expect me to do? All I can really do is to say this has been a journey many of us have been on, and we've had to come to recognise we were wrong. But it's not just me, it's loads of people. And that is part of the spiritual journey we all work on. And if it hadn't been this, it'd probably been something else, because we all are wrong about everything to start with. It's, life is all about learning to understand God in a better way." So there are one or two people I know who had serious mental health issues who I think were damaged by the whole evangelical church environment. And sometimes they see me as being the symbol of all the damage done. And I think they have to work that out through counselling, really, because all I can do is say, "I'm sorry, but since you knew what you were coming to, we were all in it together, really." It's very hard, especially people who've not got much support now.
Here we are, 2018. You're a man of certain years. You've got a lovely Italian stallion as a partner.
Yep.
And I want you to, just for a second, to look back. At what moment do you look back on to remind yourself of why you've chosen to be a Christian?
Right. Why have I chosen to be a Christian?
You've gone through so much. You've been rejected, hurt, loved as well.
Yes. I think for as long as I can remember, I had a longing to understand God, or what He was about, what God is about, and a hunger for things. I just felt. I remember my early photography days. Actually, I'd been quite a successful professional photographer long before I went into the ministry. But there was something about it that, however interesting the photography was, it was all totally empty. And I thought, is this really what life's all about? And surely there must be something more. So I just had this great hunger to understand what that more was. And instinctively I gravitated towards the church, because I thought the church and the Bible had something to teach me, and I needed to find out what that life was about. And I think it'd be worth saying, really, that for all the problems of the evangelical churches and the problems they cause for people, the one great thing about them is they do articulate their faith. They do talk about it. And I'd grown up in an Anglican church where nobody talked about their faith. In fact, they just thought, well, if you were English, white, middle class, Tory voting, of course you were a Christian. But that didn't tell me anything, except that it was just a facile, empty religion, which is all about performance and tradition. And I wanted something more. And the evangelical church taught me that it was a relationship with Jesus. That was the key. It was. I think sometimes we overstress the personal relationship with Jesus bit, because actually Jesus has a relationship with all of us in different ways, but it's coming to an understanding that God is interested in you and me, every one of us, in the most intimate and wonderful way, and He loves us, and this life is all about coming to understand that love for God that God has for us individually and for everybody else, and we're the messengers of that. It's our duty to make that love known to everybody else that we meet. So that's the key thing, really.
Thank you very much.